At the engagement banquet, Ethan's childhood sweetheart who had been abroad for many years showed up uninvited. She was dressed grandly, looking at him affectionately with red, rimmed eyes. She seemed more like the protagonist of this banquet than I, the bride, to be. She said that since she couldn't marry him, she would attend his engagement ceremony in full dress to fulfill a self-deceiving dream. I laughed. It wasn't that complicated. He was just a man. If she wanted him, she could have him. Isabella was going to return to the country to attend my engagement banquet with Ethan. As one of the parties involved in this engagement banquet, I should be the last one to know about this. Ethan was a perfect boyfriend. Because of my poor stomach, he never let me eat outside food and cooked for me every day after work. The rhythmic sound of chopping vegetables in the kitchen covered the message notification sound of the mobile phone. Seeing that Ethan didn't hear it, I subconsciously picked up the phone and took a look, thinking that if there was an important message, I would take the phone in for him. Unexpectedly, that one glance made me freeze in place. There was a group chat in his phone that I had never seen before. I didn't know if it had just been created. The group name was very simple, just the group without that woman. This name was quite appropriate. Except for me, Ethan and his friends were all in the group. They were eagerly discussing Isabella's return to the country in the group, discussing how to give her a welcome party, and their tones were full of anticipation and excitement. It was as if the person who was going to get engaged to Ethan the day after tomorrow was her, not me. I had known for a long time that his friends didn't like me that much. In their eyes, it seemed that my appearance had broken up Ethan and Isabella, this perfect couple. If our world was a novel, then without a doubt, in their eyes, I was the vicious female supporting role. So I never thought that I could fully integrate into them. All I asked for was to get along peacefully. After my relationship with Ethan stabilized, they gradually started to call me sister-in-law and would invite me to some activities occasionally. I thought that even if they didn't like me that much, they had accepted me. But until now, seeing the messages in the group, I realized how wishful I was. The messages in the group continued. It was Blake, a mutual friend of Ethan and Isabella. He was asking if Ethan could arrive on time for her welcome party. Probably seeing that Ethan didn't reply, Blake directly tagged him in the group. Isabella has come all the way back. You won't let her down, will you? Bro, you haven't replied for so long. Don't tell me you're still cooking for that woman. You said you don't even like her. Why do you have such a strong sense of responsibility? That sentence, "don't like," deeply stabbed my eyes. Ethan didn't like me? I didn't understand. If he didn't like me, why did he chase me in the first place? Why was he so good to me and was about to get engaged to me? Blake became more and more excited in the group, and there were occasional shouts of encouragement, cheering on, from others. The group was lively that I roughly flipped through the chat records. Since there was no useful information except for the cheering on and accusations, I didn't look any further. I set the message as unread and went to the kitchen to give Ethan his phone. Your phone has been ringing just now. Hurry up and see if there's something important looking for you. You can just check for me. You know that. Ethan said as he took the phone. But after seeing the content in the group, the last 4 words stopped on his lips. Know what? I stared at the Candy Crush interface on my phone and asked him without looking up. Oh, nothing, nothing. Ethan forced a smile. He smiled and I also smiled. The two of us pretended as if nothing had happened. 3. I've never been a magnanimous person, especially when it comes to relationships. I can't tolerate even a bit of betrayal. I made this clear to Ethan the first time he said he wanted to be with me. At that time, we were still in college. Because of a competition, the two well-known people in the school met for the first time in an official occasion. Not long after the competition ended, he asked me out and formally expressed that he wanted to chase me and be with me. The first time, I refused him without thinking. He asked why. I told him that his feeling of wanting to be with me seemed like a whim, and there was a girl who was always by his side, Isabella. But I only regard her as my sister. I still remember that Ethan was a bit excited when he said this, and his voice rose, as if this could convince himself. Biological sister? Do you have a blood relationship? I asked him. Ethan was speechless. I just smiled and picked up my bag to leave. Before leaving, I told him that it was impossible for us because I wouldn't accept my boyfriend playing some kind of tacit brother-sister game with a girl who had no blood relationship with him. At that time, I thought my intersection with Ethan would end there. But unexpectedly, for my sake, he directly distanced himself from Isabella and even had conflicts with those brothers who had played with him since childhood. I asked him why, and he said that was the sincerity he wanted me to see. I saw his sincerity, so I gave him a chance, and finally we got together naturally. As for Isabella, I don't know if she couldn't accept this fact. She chose to follow her family's arrangement and went abroad. Ethan's brothers also held a grudge against me because of Isabella's departure. I was passive throughout this matter, so I didn't understand why their hatred came so inexplicably. For I didn't expose the group chat in front of Ethan. First, he hadn't sent any messages in the group, and it was possible that he didn't know about it either. Second, I had seen his kindness to me over the years. Before there was solid evidence, I didn't want to convict him just based on a few messages sent by others. So I gave him the phone and gave him the right to decide what to do. Who sent the message? I stood next to him and casually asked this question as if on a whim. No one, just a few spam messages. Ethan prevaricated and turned off the phone screen. My heart sank unconsciously. Ethan, I gave you a chance. You'd better not let me down at this time. Seeing that I didn't speak, Ethan put the phone face down and handed me a plate of prepared food. You must be hungry after waiting for so long. Come on, let's go eat. Ethan might have thought he had covered it up well. But what he didn't know was that after being together for so many years, I knew him much better than he thought. 5 the next day, that is, the day before our engagement. Ethan called me and said that he had something urgent to work overtime and would come back late at night, asking me to solve dinner by myself. I smiled and said okay to him, but after hanging up the phone, I went out to the hotel where they said in the group yesterday that they would give Isabella a welcome party. I'm a suspicious person. Once suspicion arises, I always have to see the truth with my own eyes. I had seen the name of the hotel box in the group yesterday. Maybe the flight was delayed. When I arrived, Isabella hadn't arrived yet. Ethan was talking with them. I heard Blake ask him, "Bro, are you really going to marry that woman? I think, anyway, you don't like her. Now that Isabella has come back for you, why don't you just take this opportunity to dump her and be with Isabella?" Ethan was holding a wine glass in his hand, staring at it for a long time. Suddenly, he let out a long sigh and drank the liquid in the glass in one gulp. After all, I was the one who provoked her first. We've been together for so long. Even if it's a mistake, I have to go all the way to the end. Besides, he smiled bitterly, if I turn back now, I'm also irresponsible to Isabella. How ridiculous. Isabella was his white moonlight, and I became the one who had to go all the way to the end. I listened outside the box, my hands unconsciously clenching into fists, my fingernails digging into my palms. It hurt, but it could keep me calm and continue listening to them. Blake became anxious when he heard Ethan's words. What's the big deal? You like Isabella, don't you? Besides, you did that back then because you had no choice, right? Then, from the conversation between Ethan and his friends, I learned the complete truth about why he chased me back then. It turned out that the company of Isabella's family had a problem with the capital chain. In order to help Isabella, Ethan went back and begged his parents to invest in her family's company. His parents were afraid it was a bottomless pit and didn't agree at first. But they couldn't stand their son's pleading, so they agreed to help Isabella's family just this once and took the opportunity to ask Ethan to keep a distance from Isabella from then on. At that time, he and Isabella were in a stage where they liked each other but hadn't confessed yet. Ethan's parents' request made him very painful, but for Isabella's sake, he still agreed. Even to reassure his parents and make Isabella give up, he found a girl to start a relationship with. Later, Isabella's family recovered, but Isabella had already gone abroad, and the two of them completely missed each other. 6. What a bloody and affectionate sad love story. If I wasn't the one who was caught by Ethan as a substitute to start a relationship and take the blame, I would have wanted to applaud them. The so-called perfect boyfriend turned out to be a liar, and the so-called happy love originated from a scam. If it weren't for the wrong timing, I really wanted to rush into the box, pick up a wine bottle and smash it on Ethan's head to thank him properly. Thank him for making me, who has lived for almost 30 years, understand myself more deeply on the day before my engagement. It turns out that I'm just a big fool. I looked down at the time. I guessed Isabella was about to arrive, so I turned off the recording function of my phone. One shouldn't make decisions when they're emotional. It wasn't time to confront them yet. Although I was so angry that my hands were shaking, I still forced myself to calm down, ready to go back, tidy up my messy mood, and then think carefully about what to do next. Ava? The sudden voice behind me startled me. I turned around and saw that it was my not-so-smart rich, second-generation boss and friend, Oliver. What are you doing here sneakily? Could it be? Oliver looked at me with a gossipy face. Hearing him speak, I quickly turned my head and glanced at the box. Seeing that the people inside didn't notice, I heaved a sigh of relief, covered his mouth, and dragged him to an empty box nearby. What are you doing here? Stealing business secrets? Or catching your philandering boyfriend? Maybe seeing my serious expression, Oliver lowered his voice and made a wild guess. Seeing that I still didn't answer, he seemed to think of something, and his expression also became serious. He gently poked my arm and said to me in a bargaining tone, "Hey, let's get this straight. We can't do anything illegal." "Shut up." I gave him an annoyed look. "Don't tell anyone that you saw me here today, or I'll chop you up." Oliver shrank his neck. "I won't tell." "Why are you so fierce?" 7. Ethan came back very late at night. Usually, no matter how late he worked overtime, I would wait for him. But today, I went to bed early. "Sleepy?" He entered the room, saw me lying on the bed, smiled, and leaned over to kiss me. I turned my face to avoid it, and his kiss landed on my face instead of my lips. Ethan was stunned. I pushed him. "Go take a shower and go to bed quickly. We have to get up early tomorrow." "Okay." He smiled gently, rubbed my hair, found his change of clothes, and went to the bathroom. Soon, the sound of water came. I raised my hand and rubbed the place where he kissed me hard. For the first time, I felt his kiss a bit disgusting. Just then, my phone next to the pillow suddenly rang. I picked it up and saw that it was a friend request. Judging from the profile picture, it should be a girl. A girl who added me as a friend at this time. I could guess who she was without thinking. I pursed my lips, clicked on the screen, and passed the friend verification. The other side seemed to have been waiting impatiently. As soon as the verification was passed, she couldn't wait to send a few photos and attached a message, "You thief, just wait. I'll get back everything that belongs to me sooner or later." Looking at the girl snuggling in Ethan's arms in the photos, I had to admit that she was really beautiful and looked very compatible with Ethan. But her brain. I suddenly laughed. She still wanted to get back what belonged to her. She just went abroad and came back. Did she think she was like concubines she returning to the palace? I quickly took screenshots of these photos and the girl's profile page, then threw the phone back next to the pillow and ignored her. 8. Perhaps she was unhappy because she was rebuffed by me the previous day. When Isabella showed up at the engagement banquet the next day, she was dressed flamboyantly. The well-tailored bright red dress, the elaborately designed coiled hair, paired with a delicate makeup, made her look more like the protagonist of today's engagement banquet than I, the bride, to be. As soon as Isabella made her entrance, she attracted everyone's attention. Among the guests present today, apart from relatives and friends of both sides, there were also some of Ethan's family's business partners. Since everyone was in the same circle, naturally someone recognized Isabella. They looked at me and then at her, as if they had smelled the flavor of gossip, wearing expressions of eager anticipation for the drama. "Brother Ethan." Isabella walked towards Ethan step by step and called out to him softly. Before she could even say anything, her eyes were already red. She looked exactly like a pitiful beauty on the verge of crying. When Ethan saw her outfit, he seemed to think of something and was also stunned. The two of them looked at each other affectionately, not noticing at all that not far away, Ethan's parents' faces had turned dark. "Yo, where did this little vixen come from? She's here to outshine the bride, to be at someone else's engagement banquet." Just as Isabella opened her mouth, about to pour out her heart to Ethan, my best friend, Grace, couldn't stand it anymore. She spoke up for me and cut Isabella off with one sentence. Surprisingly, neither of the two main characters said anything, but Blake got angry first. He stood up, pointed at Grace, and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Watch your mouth." "Hey, that's strange. I wasn't talking about you. What are you getting so worked up about? Could it be?" Grace didn't finish her sentence. She just let her eyes circle around the three of them, then shook her head and clicked her tongue a few times, with an expression that said, "What a messy circle." Blake was so angry that he almost started cursing. This time, Grace turned her target towards Ethan. "Hey, Ethan, did you mistake someone? Your wife is right here. What are you doing having a loving stare down with another woman? And you?" Finally, I was the one being scolded. "She's come right to your doorstep, and instead of standing up for yourself, you're just watching the show, right?" Well, Queen's song equally targeted everyone. 9 Ethan, I walked up to the two of them, suppressing the discomfort in my heart, and my tone was unexpectedly calm. "What's going on here? Give me an explanation." "Ava, Perhaps my calmness made Ethan seem a bit flustered. "Let me explain." "Okay, go ahead. I'm listening." Ethan was stunned by my attitude and seemed to suddenly not know where to start. "Didn't you want to explain? Why aren't you talking?" I asked him. Isabella couldn't hold back anymore. "That's enough. Don't make things difficult for brother Ethan. He didn't know anything about this. I did all this on my own initiative. I've dreamed of marrying him since I was a child. Now that you've taken him away from me, I don't intend to fight you for him. I just want to wear this dress to fulfill a dream. Is that not allowed?" As Isabella spoke, tears started to fall. She was crying so pitifully. It was as if she and Ethan were a pair of star-crossed lovers, and I had become the one who separated them. I was so angry that I laughed. I turned to look at Ethan. "If I remember correctly, you were the one who chased me, right? So why does it seem like I'm the one who stole someone's boyfriend? Now, look, the girl is crying. Should we two kneel down and kowtow to her?" Pfft, Grace couldn't help but laugh out loud during the meal and secretly gave me a thumbs up. 10 The originally nice engagement banquet ended in a fiasco. Ethan's parents forced smiles to see off the guests. Their faces were almost as dark as the bottom of a pot, and they still had to clean up his mess and come to comfort me. "Ava, you're the daughter-in-law I like the most. Don't worry. Ethan is yours. Even if others want to snatch him, I won't allow it." Ethan's mother took my hand and spoke loudly. Without having to specify, everyone knew who she was talking to. Isabella's face turned pale, and she hid in the corner crying. Blake was beside her, comforting her. "Ava, let's talk." At this time, Ethan quietly walked up to me. His mother looked at him, then at me, sighed, and gently patted the back of my hand, leaving the space for the two of us. "Are you sure you want to talk here?" I pointed at Isabella, who was still crying not far away. "In front of your childhood sweetheart?" Ethan stopped in the middle of opening his mouth, then pulled me to the rest area outside the hotel. As soon as we came out, he confessed to me first. "I did know in advance that Isabella was coming to our engagement banquet, but I didn't expect her to come dressed like this." Why didn't you tell me if you knew in advance? I asked. Ethan was speechless. It took him a long time to answer. I was afraid you'd be unhappy. Do you think I'm happy now? Ethan, after all these years, you should know me well. So don't treat me like a fool. I pointed out his thoughts bluntly. You weren't afraid I'd be unhappy. You were worried that I wouldn't agree and that your childhood sweetheart would be heartbroken, so you made the decision without asking me first. When you made this decision, you were more concerned about Isabella's feelings than mine, which led to today's farce. To put it bluntly, you don't trust me, and in your heart, Isabella is more important than me, isn't she? 11 Ethan had nothing to say. I also felt extremely bored. In fact, the moment I found the group chat messages in his phone, I wanted to break up with him. But everyone knew that we were about to get engaged. If I broke up with him then, no matter what the reason was, as long as it didn't make a big scene, most people would probably think I was being unreasonable. But I wasn't the one at fault. Why should I bear the blame? So I pretended not to know anything and let things develop. Once a scene was made, in front of everyone's eyes, there would be a ready-made reason for the breakup. Yes, from Isabella's rather cheesy words, I guessed that she would definitely cause some trouble. But I didn't expect her to make such a big mess. Not only me, but also Ethan and his parents became the laughingstock in this farce. Since you can't let her go and we're not married yet, why don't you break up with me and marry her? The wedding dress and the hotel have already been booked in advance. You just need to retake the wedding photos. It's time, saving and labor, saving. I gave Ethan what I thought was a very reasonable suggestion. Unexpectedly, he didn't appreciate it. Instead, he looked hurt. Ava, just because of this, you want to break up with me? Then what about our feelings over the past few years? Ethan was being a bit unreasonable. I looked at him speechlessly, really wanting to say that I was just unlucky. He had been treating me like a fool for 6 or 7 years. Now that I was letting him go without holding a grudge, not only did he not appreciate it, but he was blaming me instead. You care so much about Isabella. I'm stepping aside to give you two a chance to start over. Isn't that good? I don't understand. Isabella is already in the past, Ava. Whether you believe it or not, I really never thought of breaking up with you. From beginning to end, I only thought about marrying you. So I should thank you, right? I was so angry at him that I laughed. Give me marriage, give Isabella your love, and then in our loveless marriage, reminisce about the love you and Isabella had that didn't lead to marriage? Ethan, I didn't realize before that you're quite good at this game. No, that's not what I meant, Ethan was eager to argue. But I didn't give him a chance to finish. Whether it is or not doesn't matter. Ethan, you should know that I've always been serious about relationships and I never say things out of anger. So now I'm solemnly telling you, it's over between us. This is not a negotiation, it's a notice. As I finished speaking, Ethan's face turned deathly pale. 12 I'm actually a bit of a procrastinator, but when it comes to relationships, I've always been decisive. I broke up with him at noon, and in the afternoon, I dragged my suitcase and brought my commonly used clothes and daily necessities to Grace's house. With our friendship of so many years, Grace understood what had happened without me having to say anything. She took my suitcase and carried it into the house, asking as she did, "Have you thought it through?" "I have," I replied. "Are you willing?" Was I willing? Of course not. After all, over the years, although Ethan's love for me was fake, my love for him was real. But no matter how reluctant I was, I had to be willing. I have a serious case of relationship cleanliness and I'm doomed not to be able to accept this half-baked situation. Forget it, forget it. I won't ask, seeing that I didn't answer. Grace waved her hand. I really can't stand you earth signs. Aren't you tired of living such a stubborn life? Of course I'm tired, but this is just how I am. What can I do? I took off my shoes and entered the house, then threw myself onto Grace's sofa and let out a long sigh. You know, I've never really experienced being favored in a relationship. No quiero sufrir el mismo tipo de agravios quejas en el amor que sufrí en la afectividad familiar cuando era niño. Grace was silent. She walked over and sat down next to me on the sofa, then silently hugged me, patting my back gently like coaxing a child. Don't be sad. If they don't cherish you, I will. Do you feel sorry for me? Do you? I laughed heartlessly, trying to look at Grace's expression, but she slapped me. Be good. Okay. 13 Life after breaking up with Ethan didn't actually change much. The biggest difference was that the person who cooked dinner for me after work every day changed from him to Grace. And then, Oliver was added to the people I ate with. Grace and I have been friends since we were kids, and Oliver is our college classmate. We got to know each other by chance. Later, after getting to know him better, we found out that he was a rich, second generation with a simple mind and a lot of money, so we had the idea of pulling him into starting a business with us. He provided the money, and we provided the labor. Just like that, we set up our makeshift team. At that time, many people didn't think highly of our business venture, thinking that we were just fooling around. But unexpectedly, a few years later, our company was getting better and better. Some time ago, the three of us were planning to try expanding overseas markets to Europe. Originally, I was the best candidate for this task, but because I was going to marry Ethan, this matter was put on hold for the time being. Now that I've broken up with him, I have no more concerns. I can just roll up my sleeves and go all out. Hearing me mention this again, Oliver looked at me. Ava, if you go on this trip, you might not be able to come back for a year or two. Have you really thought it through? What's there to think about? I smiled indifferently. They say energy is conserved. I've had bad luck in love, so I should have some good luck in my career, right? Seeing that I was serious, Grace and Oliver exchanged a look. Oliver nodded. Okay, then you. Before he could finish his sentence, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I thought it was a sales call, so I hung up casually. Unexpectedly, the person was quite persistent. Every time I hung up, he called back. Finally, Grace said, "Answer it and see." It's not easy to find such a persistent salesman these days. 14 It was a bit unexpected. On the other end of the phone wasn't a salesman, but Blake. It was a bit noisy on his side. I couldn't tell if he was in a KTV or a bar. Ava, Ethan is drunk and keeps looking for you. Can you come over? What do you want me for just because Ethan is drunk? I'm not an antidote for drunkenness, I said, feeling speechless. If you really can't do anything, you can find Isabella. Don't you always look down on me and hope the two of them can get together? Seize the opportunity. Maybe your CP will have a happy ending soon. Blake was left speechless by my retort and couldn't come up with a response for a while. I directly hung up the phone and looked at Grace and Oliver. Where were we just now? Let's keep talking. We were talking about. Oliver had just said 2 words when the phone rang again. By then, I was getting angry. I answered the phone and asked, "Can't you understand me? Can you just leave me alone? Ever since I broke up with Ethan, I have nothing to do with him or you guys. Don't bother me. Ava, it's me." Ethan's voice came from the other end of the phone, tinged with a bit of drunkenness. You blocked me, and I couldn't get through to you. I had to use Blake's phone to call you. Ava, I miss you so much. I was wrong. Can you come back? Please, come back. Go back. I paused, then sneered. Me go back? What about Isabella? I don't like her anymore. I thought I couldn't let her go, but actually, it was just an obsession. Ava, the person I like now is you. Ethan, I suddenly felt a bit sad, not sure if it was for myself or for Isabella. You're such a scumbag. What responded to me from the other end of the phone was a long silence. 15 Just when I thought Ethan wouldn't say anything more and was about to hang up the phone, Blake's voice came from there. His voice wasn't loud, as if he was scolding Ethan. What do you keep looking for her for? You were so good to her and even gave up Isabella for her. And what happened? She doesn't appreciate it at all. Such a heartless woman doesn't deserve to be loved. I say she deserves to be unloved by her parents and have an unfortunate childhood. Since I put the call on speaker to eat, when Blake said this, not only my face, but also Grace's and Oliver's expressions changed. Grace slapped the table hard and shouted towards the phone, "What the hell are you talking about, you bastard?" Ethan seemed to realize something at this time, and his voice was panicked. Ava, address. I interrupted him coldly. What? I'm asking for the address where you are now. Don't you want to see me? I'll come right over. Ethan paused. Before I completely lost my patience, he gave me an address. I'm going out for a while. I hung up the phone, picked up my coat from the sofa, put it on and walked out. Hey, we'll go with you. Grace quickly tugged at Oliver, motioning for him to follow. Oliver was still a bit confused. Why are we going with her? Grace pointed at my back. Watch her, in case something serious happens later. 16 When I arrived at the address Ethan told me, there were only him and Blake left in the private room. When he saw me, Ethan's eyes lit up for a moment, then seemed to think of something and quickly dimmed. Ava, I'm sore. He might have wanted to apologize to me, but I didn't want to hear it, so I silenced him with a loud slap. Hey, you woman. Blake said. I turned to look at him. Do you want a slap too? He should have wanted to stand up for Ethan, but whether it was because he felt guilty or was scared by my eyes, he finally shut up resentfully. Ethan, is it fun? I shifted my gaze from Blake to Ethan. Telling my brothers about the harm I've suffered as a joke, letting them laugh at me, pity me, and attack me with those things. Is that really fun? Ava, I didn't. Ethan's face was pale, and even his defense seemed weak. Didn't? I sneered. If you didn't, how would they know these things? Clearly, I only told these things to you, right? 17 Not long after I got together with Ethan, my mom somehow found out my address and came to see me once. He happened to run into her. She came to ask me for money because her son was about to get married and needed money to buy a wedding house. That day was probably the first time Ethan saw me lose control of my emotions since he knew me. After I drove my mom away, he seemed to be scared by me too. I had never mentioned the messy things at home to him. It wasn't that I wanted to hide them from him, but I just thought it was unnecessary. But since he saw it and asked, I told him. These things aren't complicated to talk about. It's just that in a family that favors sons over daughters, they always ignore the daughter and sacrifice her interests for the son. For example, when they bought fried chicken for my younger brother when I was a kid, to prevent me from competing with him, they made me wait on the roadside in the cold winter. As a result, they forgot to come back for me, and I waited there until it was dark. I almost froze to death that snowy night. Another example is that when I grew up, in order to save money for my brother to get married, they took more than 100,000 yuan in betrothal gifts, hid my admission notice, and wanted to marry me off to the fool in the village back home. I still remember the look of pity in Ethan's eyes when he heard these things. He held me in his arms as if holding a fragile treasure and asked me why I didn't tell him these things earlier. I also told him frankly that the wounds I suffered in my childhood were not medals. I didn't want to use these to gain sympathy, nor did I need to show the wounds to others again and again. That helpless little girl has grown up. She has become her own strongest support. She deserves anyone's love and can also calmly accept anyone's departure. Of course, anyone includes Ethan. So I told him that if one day he fell in love with someone else, he could just tell me directly. I would leave without hesitation. What did he say at that time? Oh yes, he said he loved me, would protect me well, and would never leave me. So this is how he protected me. 18 Ethan, I looked at him. You don't love me as much as you seem to. I analyzed his heart calmly and cruelly. If you really loved me that much, you wouldn't have let your brothers disrespect me. If you really loved me that much, you wouldn't have so easily told them the things I didn't want to mention before. Let me guess what you said in front of them. You told them how unfortunate my childhood was, how much you regretted provoking me, but you're a responsible man, so for the sake of your great sense of responsibility, you could only give up the one you love and endure the grievance to stay with me, right? What were you thinking when you said you loved me? Were you thinking, look how great I am, I'm saving her? No, Ava, I do love you. I really love you, but what? But you just didn't understand your own heart before? I didn't hide the sarcasm in my tone. I took out my phone and showed him the provocative messages Isabella sent me, then played the recording of their conversation that day for him to listen to. So this is your love. It's really ridiculous. What about you? Maybe realizing that there was no hope of me turning back, Ethan suddenly erupted. He stood up and accused me loudly. Do you have to be so aggressive? Do you really love me? Haven't I been good to you all these years? Just because of this one thing, you want to break up with me? Yes, I admit that I didn't let go of Isabella before, but I didn't do anything too wrong, right? Even when she came back to me, didn't I still choose to stay with you? Why can't you forgive me just this once? Hey, I can't stand this. Ethan, listen to yourself. Are you even making sense? Grace, who arrived a step later than me, heard Ethan say this as soon as she found the private room. She couldn't hold back. She pushed the door of the private room open and rolled up her sleeves, ready to charge forward, but was stopped by Oliver. Calm down, my lady. Don't forget, we're here to stop Ava from doing anything extreme, not for you to charge ahead and beat the enemy to death before her. 19 These two live treasures. Thanks to Grace and Oliver's interruption, the pent-up anger in my chest suddenly dissipated a lot. I stepped forward and patted Grace soothingly, then picked up a glass of wine and walked up to Ethan. After looking at him for a few seconds, I unceremoniously splashed the wine in his face. Ethan, from the beginning, the one who was wrong wasn't me. And until now, I don't think I'm wrong. If you didn't like me, you shouldn't have provoked me. Even after being together for so many years, I'm not indispensable. If you want to make do, you should ask if I'm willing to settle. The reason I came here today is to tell you face that you're really pretentious and disgusting. After saying that, I didn't look at Ethan's reaction. I grabbed Grace and Oliver, one by one, and was about to leave. Before going out, my eyes swept over Blake on the side. I paused, then said to him, I forgot to say, you're the same. 20 The group of us came out of the private room. Grace seemed a bit regretful. I thought you'd at least curse him out and then beat him up. I didn't expect you to just let him go like this. Actually, I thought about doing that on the way here, but then I thought it wasn't necessary. Whether it's my original family or Ethan, since there will be no intersection in the future, I shouldn't let them affect my emotions anymore. You make it sound so easy. Grace rolled her eyes. Then what did you come here for? Can you give me a little face? I'm not a saint. I can't be completely emotionless. It takes some time to let go. All right, Grace raised her hands in a surrender gesture. You, Miss Ava, are always right. Then may I ask, Miss Ava, what are you going to do next? What else can I do? Since men can't be relied on, of course I'm going to focus on my career. 21 The plan and scheme for expanding overseas markets were quickly finalized. I said goodbye to Grace and Oliver, happily got on the plane, and was away for 3 years. In these 3 years, I led a busy and fulfilling life and never paid attention to Ethan's news again. Until the eve of my return to the country, Grace called to say she would pick me up at the airport. We were chatting, and somehow the topic turned to Ethan. He seems to have fallen out with Isabella and doesn't contact those previous brothers much either. Some time ago, he didn't know what got into him and even came to me to ask about your news, saying he would wait for you to come back. What he wants to do is his freedom. It has nothing to do with me. I was calm inside, so I could say it lightly. Just as I told Ethan a long time ago, I've never been a magnanimous person. I will never forgive those who have hurt me. Maybe I should also thank him, and everyone who has hurt me along the way. They made me understand that no one is born to love you, and no one should always love you. So I won't passively wait for love to come, nor will I wrong myself for someone else's love. After all, loving yourself well is the truth of life.